Hello everyone and welcome to 9 Inch Charge, a Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer the Old World discussion channel. Today we've got a request from Nick from Sydney who asks, how can I paint yellow kruleboyz shields? Nick is returning to the hobby after a bit of a break and is just getting back into painting, so I hope this tutorial is useful for you. It's very straightforward, it looks really effective, and there's no really difficult techniques in here. So as you can see, I've got my shield here and it's just base coated in Citadel Grey Seer, which is the paint that they recommend you use with the contrast paints. You can also use the other one, Wraithbone, and also it works pretty well over white. And the first thing we're going to do to this shield is to really liberally apply a wash of Iyanden yellow. So I'm going to apply this straight out of the pot and I'm going to load my brush up really heavily and start slopping it on. I'm just going to put it into all the nooks and crannies, and if it pulls a bit too much here and there, I'm just going to try and push it along with my brush so that I get a nice even coat. What does happen is sometimes it pulls a little bit too much in some areas and not enough in another. Just keep touching it up, and I'd recommend you do this while it's wet, because if you do it when it's dry you don't get such a great effect. So once it's all covered, I'm just going to take a little bit of the contrast off where I think it's pulled too much. And to do this, I'm using a brush that is completely dry and using it pretty much like a sponge just to take off a little bit of the excess paint. So for me, I found that mainly it did this around the edge of the shield and in the mouth. There we go, and I think I'm just touching up a couple areas here and there, just making sure that it is evenly spread, and once I'm happy we'll move on to the next stage. So the contrast paint is dry now, and as you can see it's left a really good effect. It's nice and dark in the recesses and it's given us a bit of a highlight on the top ends as well. But just to add a little bit more depth to it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a highlight of yellow over the raised areas. To do this, I'm going to use Mini Paint's Canary Yellow, but there's loads of other bright yellows that you could use. For example, you could use Flash Gitz from Citadel. So using my small layer brush, I'm just going to apply this just on the raised areas, so things like the nose, and I did all around the edge of the shield as well, because that's slightly raised. The eyebrows and the mouth. This will just help give a bit more definition. The contrast paint does give a lot of definition itself, but I always like to add a little highlight on top. It just makes it pop a little bit more. And there we have it. This shield is now looking really bright and vibrant and intimidating, and something you can see the kruleboyz using as they kind of punch through the mist to come at their enemies. But for me, I think it's a little bit too bright. You know, the kruleboyz, they live in swampy areas, they're always in battle, and I think that it needs a bit of weathering. So the next step we're going to do is to apply a bit of weathering over the yellow. And to do this, we're going to make it look like it's been chipped. So we're going to just take some Rhinox hide here, and I'm going to apply it with a sponge that I've just torn the corner off that I got in the kitchen. So I'm just going to dab the sponge in the paint, and then I'm going to work the excess off on some kitchen paper. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of chipping using the sponge, and just in areas where I think that there might have been a bit of battle damage. So don't do this all over. I've picked 3 points across the shield that I'm going to do, and I'm just going to start working it in the top right here. And then a little bit on the bottom and a little bit over by the eye. You can't really go wrong with this. Just make sure that you don't have too much paint on the sponge, because otherwise, you know, you will just completely coat that shield in brown paint, which is not what you want to do. You want to have it a bit speckly. So now it looks like the paint has been chipped. But we're going to have it chipped a bit more. We're going to make sure that it's chipped all the way back down to the metal of the shield. So the next step after this is to paint in a little bit of silver into the brown. So to do this, I'm going to use Stormhost silver, which is a really, really bright silver. And I'm just using my small airbrush again here, and I'm just painting really carefully into little bits inside of the brown, just to make it look like it's chipped really, really nice and deep. So just take your time with this, be really careful, because you don't want to have too much silver, and as I said, you want it to kind of be inside of the brown. But once this is done, it gives a really great effect, and it really does look like it's chipped and battle damaged, and I think that's a bit better than just the yellow on its own, because as I said, you know, these are the kruleboyz. These guys are fighting in swamps, they're always bashing their shields into stuff, and, you know, they need to look the part. And it just helps to stop the model from looking a bit flat, just a flat yellow, even though it's got a highlight on it. You know, this is going to bring it to life a bit more. With that done, we're now ready to apply the same silver to other areas of the shield. So we're going to apply it to the teeth, and we're going to apply it to the eyes, and a few other bits and bobs around the shield, the little details. So I'm going to use the same silver, Stormhost silver. As I said, this is a really bright silver. It's probably too bright for this job. You're probably better off using a slightly darker silver, but it's just my preference. I always use a really bright silver, and then I wash it back to where I want it to be. So let's apply all this all over the bits that we want, and then we'll come back and we'll apply some washes. When that's finished, the shield's really beginning to come together now, but as I said, that silver is really, really too bright for this model, and we need to make it a little bit more worn and a little bit run down. So I usually always use Nuln oil to wash my silvers, but because these are the kruleboyz and they live in the swamp, I'm going to use Coelia Greenshade to give it a bit of a green, a bit of a poisonous look to it. You could use something else like Biltown Green, but it's a little bit brighter. If you use Biltown Green, you might want to mix it a little bit with your Nuln oil before you start. So I'm just going to apply this over all the bits of metal. What I usually try to do when I do this is, if I've got a long piece of metal like a sword or something like that sticking out, is that I'll try to apply it more liberally towards the base and less at the top, and you can create a nice little transition. So I'll try and do that on the tusks and on the teeth when I'm using this green shade. And you don't have to be too precise. If you do go over anywhere, you can come back and use the yellow that you used to highlight just to cover up any mistakes that you've made. So here you can see me applying it more liberally at the bottom, and then just working my way with my brush up the top, and leaving the very top of the tusks completely silver. And it's really starting to look a bit more menacing now, a bit more mischievous. This green really helps it pop, I think. So there we are. Once that's done, I'm just going back in with a little bit of Stormhost silver just to highlight over the top of a couple areas here and there, because I don't want the green to take over completely. Obviously, we still want this to look like it is metal. And as we saw after we applied the contrast paint, it's always best just to come back after you've done a wash with just a little highlight. But this is really beginning to pop and come together now. I'm really happy with how this is starting to look. The very last thing I did after this was I just felt that the green wasn't quite dark enough inside the very bottom recesses, so I just came back in with Nuln oil, and just on the very, very bottom, as I said, to create this kind of transition up to the top silver, I just washed it a tiny bit with Nuln oil, and I'd hardly used any at all, but the effect really, really paid off and really helped, because Stormhost silver is a very bright metal, and we do want it to look a little bit more dark, a little bit more grimy. And once that's been applied, the shield is finished. Well, thank you very much for watching, and I really hope that you found this useful. I hope it helps your kruleboyz to pop on the tabletop. If you've got any other requests of things that you would like to see along these lines, please let me know. Obviously, this is mainly a discussion channel, but I have been in the hobby for a long time now, and I do some commission painting on the side. I have had a request to do some snow bases, so that might be a video that I'll be doing in the future, but anything else, please let me know. Thank you very much for watching. This has been 9 Inch Charge, and I will catch you next time.